Hello, and welcome back to Seek the Joy podcast. Happy Seek the Joy Tuesday. I'm your host, Sydney Weiss, and today I am sharing with you our fourth session from Seek the Joy Summit. It was our second panel of the day with Ardre, Orie, Kimothy Joy, Achea Red, and Lisandra Vazquez. And this conversation was really all about stepping into your authentic voice and the importance of sharing your story. This is truly a powerhouse group of women, and I was so excited and honored to share this session, to have all four incredible women be part of this panel. One of the biggest lessons that I have learned from Seek the Joy over the last 5 years basically has been around the impact of sharing our stories, and this impact is so far reaching, and we often underestimate what sharing our story, the impact it has not only on ourselves, but also on others. And sharing our stories often serves as a space for hope and inspiration. So this panel, I just was so impressed and so grateful. It is a long conversation, by the way, so I'm going to do my best to keep this introduction short, but I want to make sure I tell you a little bit about all four panelists for today's episode. Ardre Orie is a celebrity ghostwriter, book publishing expert, playwright, film director, and CEO of 13th and Joan Publishing House. She was on episode 106 of the podcast. Kimothy Joy is an artist who paints and writes as a way to convey what's on her heart. She was on episode 18 of the podcast, like way back in 2018. Achea Red is the founder of Real Girls Fart and makes mental health awareness her mission because for Achea, it's personal. Achea was on episode 93 of the podcast. And last but certainly not least, Lisandra Vazquez. She is now an Atlanta, Georgia-based Puerto Rican media strategist and photographer. She has used storytelling to grow a number of businesses through social media. You can check out Lisandra on episode 73 of the podcast. Now more than ever, I just think it's so important that we have reliable resources that we can turn to. And that's where today's sponsor, BetterHelp, comes in. So I would love to share with you a little bit more about BetterHelp. BetterHelp will assess your needs and match you with your own licensed professional therapist. And it's easy and free to change counselors if you don't think the person you've matched with is a good fit. And no matter where you're listening to Seek the Joy podcast right now, you can also use BetterHelp because the service is available for people worldwide too. I just think it's so valuable to talk to someone about what it is that you're going through, whether that's anxiety, depression, grief, loss, changes at work, or friendship dynamics or relationships, or you want to talk about the challenges of the last couple of years. And BetterHelp offers a broad range of expertise in their counselor network. So you'll get timely and thoughtful responses. Plus, you can schedule weekly video or phone sessions too, which I still think is a game changer. I really want you to live a happier, more joyful, and just ease-filled life. That's why I share these conversations with you. And so I'm just excited to share that as a listener of Seek the Joy podcast, you will get 10% off your first month by going to betterhelp.com/seekthejoy. Join over 1 million people and counting, taking charge of their mental health with the help of an experienced professional. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/seekthejoy. The link will also be included in our show notes. I am just so thrilled, really, to share this conversation, this panel session with Achea, Ardre, Lisandra, and Kimothy from Seek the Joy Summit. All of the links to connect with these incredible women and to tune into their episodes from Seek the Joy podcast, all of the links are in the show notes. This summit was just such an incredible day, and this session was just one incredible light bulb moment after another, because through storytelling, of course, you share so much of who you are, but you're also crafting for yourself a very intentional, thoughtful, mindful space to share your story. And in doing so, we can have such a large impact on the world. You can really change the world in your own small way just by being yourself, which is through sharing your story. And there's just so much tremendous joy, I think, in connection and fulfillment and impact that can come from sharing your story. So safe to say, I loved this conversation and I am so excited to share it with you. So as always, Please connect Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn. We are at Seek the Joy Podcast everywhere. Leave us a 5-star rating and review on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. And I would just love to hear what your biggest takeaway has been from listening not only to this panel session, but all of the sessions that we have shared so far from Seek the Joy Summit. Next week, I will be sharing with you our final session from the summit. It's another conversation you're not going to want to miss. So without further ado, I said I was going to keep this intro short, and now we're at like the 6-minute mark. So, okay, without further ado, let's dive into this one. Our 4th session, our 2nd panel from Seek the Joy Summit, the importance of sharing your story, with Achea Red, Ardre, Orie, Lisandra, Vazquez, and Kimothy Joy. All right, so we are heading now into our 2nd panel of the day. I am really honored to bring you this panel. I'm going to start inviting these incredible women up on the stage. It's so honored. This is a powerhouse group, let me tell you. So we're going to invite everybody. Hi, Achea. Good morning or good afternoon, actually. I don't even know what time it is anymore. Everybody is here. Hello. How's everybody doing on this Saturday? Oh, Ardre and Kimothy, I think you guys are muted, but it's all good.
Doing well. Hi, everyone.
Hello.
Hi, everyone.
I am so excited and so honored that you are all here. I want to do a little intro of each of you before we get going, if that sounds good. Okay, so to start, we are joined by Ardre Orie. Ardre is a celebrity ghostwriter, book publisher of the beautiful publishing house 13th and Joan. And Ardre and I sat down for the podcast back in October 2020. I can't believe it. It feels like it was just yesterday, Ardre. So time is flying. We also have with us Kimothy Joy, who is an artist and an author. And Kimothy, really, you paint and write as a way to convey what's on your heart. And Kimothy is like an OG Seek the Joy guest. Kimothy joined me early in the podcast, episode 18 from 2018. So it has been a minute. Up next, we have Achea Red, and Achea is the founder of Real Girls Fart. And Achea, you and I spoke for the podcast in July, episode 93 of 2020. And for you, mental health awareness is your mission because for you, it's really personal. So I'm excited to dive into that with you today. And then Lisandra is here. Lisandra Vazquez is a media strategist, and you and I connected in 2019 when we were talking about auras and energy. So I'm so excited that you're here. You really use storytelling to grow businesses and brands. So this is going to be a phenomenal conversation. So thank you all for being here.
For having us.
Thank you for having us.
Oh, so I want to start off, one of the biggest lessons that I have learned from Seek the Joy over the last 3.5 years has been centered around the impact of sharing our story. It's really far-reaching, and often I think we underestimate the impact of sharing our stories, the impact it has both on us individually, but then also on others. And I also think sharing our stories can offer a space of hope and inspiration too. So Ardre, I would love to start with you, if we can, because through 13th and Joan, you have created a home really for stories that may otherwise go untold. And so when you and I sat down for the podcast last year, you said so many things that really stayed with me and left an impression. But one thing for sure that stayed with me ever since is that no one can tell your story better than you can. And so when you experience something, you should be the person who's sharing your story. So to kick us off, why is it so important that we share our stories, that we share our personal experiences?
Yeah, I got goosebumps. I want to say thank you, first of all, to you, Sydney, for having us all and for putting this together. You've done a tremendous job and, it shows. So thank you.
Thank you.
I think that from the moment we are conceived, our story begins to be told for us. We're spoken for, every aspect of who we are supposed to become, and all of those things, the narrative is already shaped for us. So, I used to wonder, why is it that we feel like we have to fight so hard to have a voice? But that eventually, led me to begin to just kind of consider the fact that so much of our narrative is controlled before we ever get a chance to speak. And so when we discover that we do have the power to speak for ourselves, when we discover that we also have the opportunity and that we really don't have to wait for someone else to give us that, there is no clearance that's needed other than what we can provide for ourselves, it's really a powerful moment. And for me personally, I think I was almost 30 until I really recognized that I did not need anyone's permission to tell my side of the story. So I believe that it's important because it is empowering. It is the thing that centers us back to who we are supposed to be. And we have the opportunity to do so unapologetically. And that is the most beautiful thing ever. It sets us free.
I love what you just said about permission. No one has to give you permission to tell your story. And Achea, I think we have to move to you because your life completely changed once you started to share your story, because so much of your work is about reminding others, and everyone actually on this panel right now, your work is really about reminding others that they're not alone, regardless of what they're experiencing. And so you're really using your life experience, your experience with mental health to help yourself. And I think other women remind themselves, you don't need permission to share your story. You can let it out. And so if you don't mind sharing, I mean, I'd love for you to talk about the impact that sharing your story, once you gave yourself that permission, what impact did it have on your life? And then what is the impact that you've seen on others too?
Well, first off, I want to say thank you to you for having all of us. You have done a tremendous job. So thank you for having me today. I believe that sharing my story has actually impacted me in a way where I am now free to be who I am. And the word authenticity, or the phrase keeping it real, like I'm real, we throw it around a lot and we use it in ways sometimes that it's not meant to be. But for me, the word authenticity truly means like showing up in the world for who you really are, not feeling as if you have to fit in or bend your edges, but that you just belong. And so when I started sharing my story, my motto has always been, if you can't find what you need, create it. And that was what I decided to do with the blog. When I was going through my mental health journey, I started to blog. I started to talk about therapy, especially in communities of color and religious communities, quite frankly, where we just don't talk about those types of things. And it really freed me to continue to share more. But then I started noticing that like other people were me too. Well, me too. And I struggle with that. And then they started having conversations with their families and their friends. And before you know it, it's a domino effect and it has great impact on the community at large.
Yeah, I love what you said, that it has this domino effect. And it reminds me so much of what we talked about in our first session with Aiden this morning about when you heal yourself, it gives other people permission to heal others because you don't know where this domino effect will lead. Kimothy, it's interesting. It reminds me so much of what you're doing with your art and your illustrations and your book, because you, in my opinion, you have been really instrumental in sharing women's stories and sharing these messages of empowerment and connection and growth and celebration, by the way, through art and creativity. And, Lisandra, I know you can speak to this too. Art and creativity can lend itself to such valuable, beautiful storytelling. And I think, Kimothy, I would love for you if we could talk a little bit about this, about how through giving yourself, again, this sense of permission to create, you've created beautiful images that are inspiring other people. So if we could chat a little bit about the role of art and creativity and storytelling, I just think it would tie this in so beautifully.
Absolutely. And thank you so much, Sydney. As everyone said, this is such a wonderful event. I feel honored to share this space with all of you and be connected with you now. Really, what a cool lineup. Everything that you said, I have like chills. It resonates, what's been shared already. And it's just, I totally identify with, giving permission. I mean, I started painting with watercolors when I was 30, and it was after a breakup. And it was like, I just hit one crisis after the other, losing my mom, divorce. And then I was in this relationship. And then, at 30, I was like, wait a minute, I just need to take some time alone and I'm going to paint just because it feels good. And that felt so liberating and radical. And I don't think it should be, but, everything was about productivity and the outcome, and, in this hyper masculine patriarchal world. So it just hit me like, oh my gosh, I'm going to stop and I'm just going to paint. And what it led to was this incredible journey of returning home to myself and like a feminine awakening. And I felt this like just bubbling up of energy and like rage, like all of it at once, like this hurricane. And I was able to express it through my artwork. And, as a kid, that's what I did too. It also connected me with my inner child. And that was always like the safest way to express myself and to be who I really am, And so I just haven't stopped. And what it led to also was painting portraits of women and deep diving into their stories. And oh my goodness, like the more I learned about them, the more I could see myself in them, like aspects. And I thought, oh, wow, they overcame that. And they had so much self-doubt, or they had imposter syndrome, and they still like did these things like that changed our world. And, these are women from all over the world, diverse backgrounds, like religions. It was just so beautiful. And I thought, wow. So it really has been a journey of healing. And then, that like revealing who I am, that authenticity piece, and then sharing that. And I see that so many other people get, some healing from that and are like, what do I like to do for fun? Or how do I like to express myself? Or who do I really want to be? So it's just been a beautiful journey.
I love what you said about this element about returning home to yourself, because when you do that, when you connect with yourself, it's that sense of permission to share your story. But then I think it allows you to foster deeper connections, not only with yourself, but also with others. And, Lisandra, I want to talk to you a little bit about this, because through, I think, developing, our own authentic voice, we can start to share our story in online spaces and help to facilitate and foster that greater sense of connection and community. And I want to ask you, how can we begin, I think, to share our stories or use storytelling in these online spaces, in community, whether you have a business or a brand, or you just are online posting about yourself for fun? How can we start to use our stories and storytelling, in these spaces? Because I think so much of it is like about being intentional.
Well, hello, everyone. Y'all are amazing. And so I'm so happy to be here.
I'm so happy you're here.
Okay. So that's a big question, because everybody has a different process, right? And I think everybody touched on different parts of why being authentic to yourself is really important. I have found that, social media is so like compare-y, and it can make you feel less than. And I know I've talked to you about this before, but I learned how to read energy and read the room and tell stories and make people laugh, because I moved here from Puerto Rico when I was 7.5. So I had to speak English. So I just had to kind of learn things guerrilla style. And so I feel like that's my way that I've moved about the world. And that's the same way I treat social media, which is like you read the room, and you listen first. You're not going to walk into a party and just like start talking. That's rude. So what you need to do is like read the room, hang out for a minute, see if there's something that interests you, you kind of listen and start the conversation, comment, follow, whatever, and then start looking inward and be really like the beautiful journal prompts that we just had. Like those were wonderful. Like looking inward, asking yourself some questions, seeing like what it is that you want to share and why it is that you want to share. I have been working with a lot of people that like, they want a high follower count, but why do you want that? Is it because you want your business to grow, or is it because you want, is it ego? So there's a lot of things you have to ask yourself why you want to share the stuff online. If you want attention, that's cute, but be honest about the fact that you want attention. If you want to share your message and feel liberated and create for the sake of creating, like Kimothy's art, like you're sharing it from your heart. It's something that heals you, and hopefully other people connect with it. But yeah, I would say that if you want to start, I would say start by looking inward and seeing what you have to say, and then put something together. And it doesn't have to be perfect, because you can always archive it. And you can always hide it, or start with something that's just fun. Like I'm a big fan of TikTok. So I think you should like go on TikTok and just make silly videos and they're like sketches to me. You just have fun, make something silly, do a voiceover and have fun with it.
I love what you said about it doesn't have to be perfect, because I think everyone on this panel right now, and I'm sure everyone tuning in too, has had these moments where you're like, I can't do it yet. I can't share my story. I can't talk until it feels like the perfect moment, or it feels like I've set it up perfectly and then it'll be great. It's all about taking messy, imperfect action. It's never going to be perfect. Achea, I'm sure you had this moment too when you were getting ready to share your story for the first time. Like, did you come up against this sense of like it needing to be perfect, or even what Kimothy was talking about with imposter syndrome?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I find that in the line of mental health advocacy work, and I talk to other people who do a lot of the same stuff that I do, that imposter syndrome is very common because in mental health recovery, it's not linear, and there are going to be ebbs and flows, peaks and valleys. And, you hope that the further you get along your journey, that you have less valleys and more peaks. But it's just the fact of the matter is that it's not going to be in a straight line, and you will have setbacks. And so I have often questioned myself and said, who do I think I am? Who am I kidding? I'm posting all of this about, being, emotionally stable or mentally exhausted. And I've got all this stuff going on. I just had a breakdown like a couple months ago. And, so I'm really mean to myself sometimes in that way. It happens less now. But when I first started out, it was tough. But I think that we have enough people that are looking down from the mountaintop trying to show people like, look at me. And we don't have enough people that are actually willing to get in the trenches and walk up the mountain with people. And so for me, I think people benefit from seeing your scars rather than your trophies. I really do believe that. And I think that has been my intention on social media.
What you just said, who am I to share my story? Ardre, reminds me of when you and I met and we were recorded for Seek the Joy, and you said, who are you not to share your story? Like, if not you, who? And I think it's about exactly what you just said, Achea, of we need to show our scars. We need to show ourselves walking the journey. It's not about the destination anyway. This is not what life is about. It's not about the destination anyway. It's about the journey. So if we can walk together and walk and share this story and this journey as we're experiencing it, we're going to change the narrative for ourselves and for others. It shifts everything. It really, really does. Kimothy, I'm curious for you too. Once you started sharing your story and you shared it so beautifully in our podcast episode together 3 years ago, which I'm telling you, 3 years, feels like it was just yesterday. I know it had such a tremendous healing impact on you, and being able, to share. And as you continue to share all these years later, do you have moments where you're just like, you have what I experienced, which is like a vulnerability hangover, which is like I put myself out there, I shared something vulnerable, and now I'm like, oh my God, I just did that. I want to crawl into a hole. Like, did I really just do that? It's like this self-doubt that comes up. Do you experience that sometimes?
Like every day. Coming on here, I was like, wait, are they sure that they want to hear what you have to say? Every single day, And I think, Achea, everything you said, I was like, yeah, I feel that. But so yes, I feel that. And then I think my self-talk has gotten better as I've learned to love myself and like mother myself in a whole new way. And I'm like, okay, yeah, because I believe everybody does have a story to share. And it's interesting that I'm so like adamant about others sharing, and I can see the gifts in the other people, but I'm like, wait a minute, like I need to turn that on to myself. Like that's just as true for me. And it's this scared little girl comes out in these moments when I'm asked to share. And you just keep making the choice to do it. And it's like, I think it's like a muscle. It just develops over time. But I think people are just craving that realness though, like to share openly and like also mess up and then like own it and stumble. We all do that. And in this like social media world and branding and marketing, you see so many images of perfection and people know that's not the real deal. And it's like, people are just craving, like, be real with me, show me how you fell and then got back up. And that's what, I learned from looking into other women's stories and all of that is that everybody stumbles. Everybody has their own things, and it's good to share that with one another. That's how we all grow together. So great question.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Lisandra, I feel like you can totally speak to this too, because when I'm on TikTok and I'm scrolling, which by the way is too many hours every day, I don't want to look at my screen time. When I'm just scrolling through TikTok, what I love to watch and what I gravitate towards is people being real. I don't want to see anything photoshopped. I don't want to see this pretend image of like your life is perfect because, that's not real. I'm gravitating towards the real content of people sharing their highs and sharing their lows. And I mean, I just think it's amazing how in a lot of ways, social media is doing a bit of a 180. So what we're seeing online, what we're gravitating towards, and then what we are sharing ourselves is shifting into that space too.
Yeah. I think that TikTok is doing a lot for, to help. Like, it's like the anti-Instagram because, and I'm even seeing that a lot of like people aren't as worried about having like the perfect Instagram feed anymore, which is like, thank God. Because as a photographer, it's just like so annoying that people want to the thing. But what I love about TikTok is that if it doesn't make me laugh, if you're not teaching me something, or if it's not like, ooh, visually stimulating, you don't make the cut. You got 2 seconds to impress me. Let's go. Like, or hook me in. And so that for me is like, it evens the playing field a little bit to the barrier, like to the entry, because for Instagram, it's like, it's so easy to think like a beautiful picture in Bali of some like very beautiful model-esque person is like, oh, of course that's gorgeous. Double tap. And like, there's like, they have like an easy, like 1 million followers just because they're like traditionally or conventionally beautiful or whatever. Cool. But there might not be something that's deep there. And so what I love about TikTok and what I love about the movement and really like what's happened in the last year culturally too, is people have more permission to speak up to things that they haven't had about topics that they have probably only talked about with their friends, especially when it comes to like socio-political stuff, like and racial issues. Like people are able to talk about it publicly now, and there's people have a lot of agency around it. So it's really amazing, and it's creating a really great platform for people to be able to talk about these things. So I love TikTok.
Yeah. Oh, I love what you just said, that it's about having this agency, knowing that you can share your story. And Ardre, this takes me back to our conversation on the podcast, because you and I really talked about in that conversation about storytelling and the role it plays in systemic racism and oppression and what's going on in the world, and how you said something that was so beautiful. And I really encourage everybody that's tuning in now and later, please listen to all of these episodes on Seek the Joy, because you think this is like really good, powerful wisdom. It's like times 100 on the actual episode. It's amazing. Ardre, we talked about how everyone sees the world through their own lens. And so it's about respecting that, acknowledging that, and then allowing people the space and the platform to share that story, to have that agency, to talk and to share, their perspective. But how do we begin to encourage people to share their story? I know you do this all the time in your work with 13th and Joan. Like, let's say someone is like, I want to share it, but I just don't know if I can. How do we start to encourage people, I think, to share their story?
Right. So I don't take necessarily a gentle approach to that. I'm very gentle, with our authors, but at the end of the day, we have all these conversations and engage and exchange all the time about purpose. Why am I here? What am I supposed to be doing? How can I make a difference? But the one thing that we all have in common is that we all have a story. We all have a path. We all have a journey, and we all have experiences that only we experienced the way that we experienced it. Two women can eat a slice of chocolate cake and have a totally different experience. And so the experience that you have is the one thing that sets you apart. We are as varied as our fingerprints when it comes to our stories. But at the end of the day, it's our responsibility to share that, because it is a blueprint for someone. the ugly parts, the beautiful parts. You know, one of the things that I've been sharing with people lately is because of the fact that we are now in a society where it is more acceptable to share your trauma. People who didn't have traumatic experiences growing up feel like there's not a space for them. And maybe I shouldn't share because I haven't been through so much. And I'm, encouraging, that's not the point. The point is, whatever you have lived, that is valuable information. It is the DNA, the blueprint that another person needs. So when it comes to encouraging people to share their stories, I almost say, the encouragement is not from me. The obligation from the universe is on you. That is the rent that we pay for being here. To share your story, that is what we owe to those who will come behind us and those who we exist and take up space with. So
can we sit in that for a moment? Like, it is our obligation to share our stories, to share our experiences, to help pave the way. I mean, anyone that's tuning in right now, drop it in the chat if this resonates with you. We have to sit in that for a moment, because if we don't share, we don't know that we're not alone in what we're experiencing. I mean, I'm curious for all of you and also anyone tuning in. I mean, I've had so many moments in my life where I thought, am I the only one experiencing this? Am I alone? And it was only until I shared something I had experienced or gone through that I realized I wasn't. I remember the first time I shared on the podcast that I didn't pass the California bar exam the first time, and I had shingles and appendicitis, and I really dove in and shared my story. And I had that vulnerability hangover, Kimothy, that I was talking about before, like big time. And then all these emails started coming in and these messages. I had shingles at 25 too. Oh my God, I had a similar experience with my appendix. I have not passed the bar 3 times. I get it. I'm with you. You don't know that you're not alone until you start sharing. And so the way that we can start to, I think, grow together and rise together and heal together is the minute we start sharing those stories.
Yes.
Yeah. Love for any of you to chime in, share your thoughts. What are you thinking? I mean, this was powerful, Ardre. I told everybody at the beginning there was going to be some major wisdom today. And I think that was really definitely one of those moments.
Oh, I'll chime in. Ardre, thank you so much for that. I felt chills of like, oh, yes, everything you said. Sharing stories is a contribution to the healing of humanity. It is, when you share from the space of like realness. And I think of it as like a tapestry, like we're all part of this beautiful, colorful, diverse, amazing tapestry. And it's like, there's rips and tears everywhere. But as we mend ours, the connective thread, people can take something from that and heal their little pocket of the tapestry, and it's like, it's that mending and sharing how you did it that heals the entire, like the fabric of it all. Mm-hmm. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, that's beautiful. That's so beautiful. Someone, I want to read a comment that just came through the chat. I relate when you said that I don't have much experience to share. I felt like I live my life boring. I need to experience more. And that reminded me, you know what? You can also share your joy. You can also share these moments of celebration. It is just as vulnerable to share your story from a space of joy and celebration and hope and optimism as it is to share your trauma or your hardship or adversity. But I think as women or as people in general, we have a hard time sharing what we're celebrating, but also we have a hard time celebrating ourselves, which is really interesting. Lisandra, I wonder if you have any thoughts on that, because I see at the bottom of my screen going like, yeah.
And I also think that we are so in our own experience and our own lives that we don't see our story and our things as incredible. Right. And other people would be like, you did that? Like, and you're like, well, it's just like what I did. Like, I went from this to this, because you're with yourself every day. It's like when you lose weight or something like that, and you're with yourself every day. So you don't see yourself from like this month to that month. And people are like, you look, what a transformation. And you're like, yeah, but it's not really that big a deal, but it is. So I think that that's what makes it really cool, Ardre, is like really just being honest with and sharing and not trying to make your story anything that it isn't, I think is a really big challenge probably for people, because I know that I've been guilty of like trying to make my story more palatable for like the Gen Pop or something like that, and like make it a little bit more PC or something. I don't know. But like the more honest I am, the more people do the thing where, like with you, Sydney, where they come to me and they're like, I felt the same thing. And they'll like comment and they'll send me emails and they'll be like, yeah, I know. I had a similar experience with a mentor and da, 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 da. And then that creates a bond. And, you know, and I just think being truthful, even though it feels crazy vulnerable to do it, you end up winning in the end.
Yeah. And we all have more in common than we believe that we do, or than we think we do. You know, sure, we may have a different socioeconomic background. We may have different levels of education. We may be living in different parts of the world. But at the end of the day, we are all united by the fact that we are living this human experience together. And I think that there is great opportunity when, even though you may not have trauma, right, as difficult as somebody else, right? Because we all know that that's relative, right? And there is no real definition of normal. But I think we're all normal-ish. And we all have stuff, you know, that we've had to overcome or whatnot. But I will say that what an opportunity for you to be empathetic to someone who has experienced something that in your mind may be a little bit more traumatic than what you've gone through. And so that just presents us with also another opportunity, you know, to kind of level up in our empathy and our willingness to be able to not only share our story, but be able to listen to other people share their stories and truly hear and not try to fix them, but to see them.
Level up in your empathy. I mean, that's really what it's about. You know, sharing your story, allowing space for someone else to share their story. It's about emerging into the space of empathy, of compassion, of allowing them to know that you hear them, you see them. Because Achea, you're right, we're so much more alike than we're different. And at the end of the day, I think as humans, we want to be seen and we want to be heard and we want to know that people see and hear us. And for who we are and what it is, you know, that we're experiencing, good, bad, or indifferent. A question came through the chat and I want to read it. And everyone, I'm so happy everyone is participating, in the chat. And don't forget, we have the Q&A feature too at the bottom if you ever want to drop a question in there, and it'll be easier for me to see it too. But there was this question, I really want to make sure we got to it. It says, Beth said, it can be empowering, but I freeze up if it is perceived as obligation to share. Why is that? I would love to hear if anyone has thoughts. I mean, I have some thoughts, but I want to hear what you all think, because I think this is interesting. Sometimes we feel like an obligation to share. If someone is vulnerable with us, we think, oh God, I got to be vulnerable right back, which I think is an interesting space, you know, to often be in.
I actually commented back to Beth, and I have a typo in there. You know, it's killing me. My bad. But I want to like delete it and retype it. I can't, Beth.
Oh, this is your moment.
But I was just saying that, you know, obligation in the sense that if you know that there is something from your truth that you could potentially say that could be the difference between someone really discovering their joy, or knowing that they're not alone in the world, or recognizing that, you know, we are more alike than different, then that is something that is so valuable. So I really, when I say obligation, it's that I don't want any person to ever take their experiences and the life that they have lived for granted, knowing that it's not valuable, or thinking, and I don't mean it like someone doesn't think their life isn't valuable. I just mean that it's of so much value that it can literally be the difference for another person. And so when we get to the point where we can share those things, we can really change lives. But we're under no obligation to share those things we're not comfortable in sharing. We're under no obligation to share when we're not ready to share. And I think that we shouldn't put that type of pressure on one another, but it is so imperative that we know how much value we're sitting on. And it's the one thing that sets us apart. You know, when we're young, we want to blend into the walls. We want to be like everybody else. If everybody's wearing jean skirts, I'm showing my age, but that's what we want to do. Wear denim skirts, you know. But if now that we're older, we really want to be different. We're cool with being whoever we are. We're cool with finding the people, you know, finding our tribe and finding those people who accept us and those who don't want to change us. They just want to make us better. So in that space, it just means that you're sitting on a gold mine. And I just want people to always know their stories are of so much value. That's it. Sorry for the typo, Beth.
I love what you just said, because it reminds me so much of something we talk about often on Seek the Joy, which is about obviously vulnerability, but this appropriate level of vulnerability and assessing for yourself if this is a moment in which I feel is appropriate, comfortable, correct for me to be vulnerable. So it's about assessing the person, the situation. Brene Brown talks about this so beautifully. The situation, the person, the moment, all these things you need to assess in the moment to say, is this the right moment for me to be vulnerable? And the truth is, it may not be, but it might be at another point. So it's also about checking in, I think, with yourself and thinking, okay, do I want to share? No? Okay, then I'm not going to share. Do I want to share? Yes. But does this feel like the right moment? Am I experiencing fear? Or is it more so my intuition saying, hold on, let's evaluate the person who's going to receive it, the moment it's going to be received. And something I have to remind myself too all the time is the way in which someone else receives your vulnerable moment is a reflection of them more than it is of you. Because we can internalize, when we share our stories, we can internalize that response as rejection. And then it stops us from sharing ever again. And it dissuades you. And then you think, well, I'm never doing that again. That's how that went, you know, and you don't want to feel that way.
Yeah.
So I think, you know, Achea, I'm curious if you have any thoughts on that, because you have been in the corner like nodding your head, and I feel like you've got something to say.
You know, I'm trying to exercise my nonverbal yeses, because sometimes I grew up in church, right? So when you agree with something, you're like, yes. So that's why I'm nodding my head incessantly, because I'm like trying to practice. But to your point, I struggle personally, right, with appropriateness of vulnerability sometimes. And I've noticed that sometimes I have been vulnerable with people. And you know what's always set me up is the expectation that they're going to be vulnerable back. Yes. And that is what has, I think, hindered me sometimes in those relationships. And then I view, to your point, Sydney, they're not being vulnerable in that moment, really because they're uncomfortable and it's a reflection of them. I view it as like, oh, they don't trust me, or, oh, there's something wrong with me. And so then I have then turned it, inward on myself. And so I'm nodding because I've experienced that very thing. And it caused me to be, quite frankly, closed up with those individuals, even when I didn't really necessarily want to be.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, is that expectation that then in turn, someone else is going to be vulnerable. Lisandra, Kimothy, if you have any thoughts, I'd love for you to share too, because I think this is something universal that we all really experience. If I'm going to be vulnerable, I hope you're going to be back. And then if not, I feel awkward.
Yeah, no, it's awkward, especially, well, all of that. Yeah, I've been there. But in the online space, I get this question a lot with people asking me how much they should share online and how much they should be vulnerable. And that's also something that you need to take into account. Check in with yourself and where you are in your healing. Like, for example, there's a lot of boundaries that I have with sharing about my personal life. I'll share. People are like, do I have to share about myself? I don't want to get on camera. And I'm like, honestly, there's all these ways to get people to know you and to tell your story without necessarily having to show your face. Mm-hmm. There's ways for there's tools that we can use for people to get to know you that don't involve being in front of the camera, although sometimes that's easier. But I like to always ask, like, what are you comfortable sharing? Where are you at in your healing? Where are you at in your process of being seen? Because sometimes if there's things that have happened in our lives, like we just don't want to be out there like that. That's fine. But like, for example, like I'm much more comfortable being myself instead of like, not like I was hiding, but I was always more comfortable being behind the scenes for other people and being like the right hand person to everybody. And so, but now I'm more comfortable like sharing about myself, and that takes time. And for me, it also took a lot of healing. So it really just have to always check in with yourself and be honest about your boundaries, and they might change from day to day. So just because you said that it's okay to share about something yesterday doesn't mean that it's okay today. And that's okay. And like, that's fine.
Beautiful advice. I love what you said too. Where are you at in your journey in being seen? We're all at a different phase in that journey. So going back to that sense of obligation to share your story, you may be in a different space than the person that just shared their story. And so, not comparing yourself, which we all do way too much, but not comparing yourself on this journey of being seen. Kimothy, I want to throw it to you in case you had anything you wanted to add to this really, this conversation. So good. I'm so grateful. This is amazing.
Yeah, Lisandra, what you're saying about just checking in where you're at. And yeah, it changes. It's like, I have like seasons, where I feel like just hibernating and processing, and I feel so raw. And it's just like honoring that and knowing that, okay, I'm in this season. Or today, it's like, if I put something out there and people don't respond the way I intended, you just can't control the way people respond. It's projection. Everybody's going through their own stuff. But like to feel like to have that energy and feel ready to handle that when you put it out there, you just have to know yourself from day to day. So yeah, that's so important. And just know if you're still processing or if it's something you just don't want to share because you're maybe shrinking or contorting or scared, like look at that. There's just a lot you can do, but honor where you're at and, design it the way you want to do it. It's up to you, the way you want to communicate and share and post, especially online.
Mm-hmm. That reminds me, it really brings us back to the beginning of this conversation about agency, and you get to choose when you share your story. You get to choose how you share your story. And I love what you have all been talking about, this sense of boundaries as part of sharing your story. Boundaries play such a key role in vulnerability too. It's not something I think that's talked about enough, because I often find when I'm having a conversation with someone, either for Seek the Joy or even when I'm on another podcast, which is always a very cool experience, and they want to talk about vulnerability, but we never talk about boundaries, about your boundaries and deciding where they are. You get to even choose your boundaries, and they can evolve over time, which I think is so important to remember too. So I want to throw it to a question we got in the chat. It's from Jessica, and it says, do you ever feel like you need to be on the defensive after sharing your story, depending on the audience? I'm in a male-dominated profession, and there always seems to be someone that wants to, quote, defend a negative experience I may have shared somewhere. It's just frustrating. I share stories with my sailors and their leader to let them know it's okay to experience good and bad and move through it. I want to just throw it to the group as a whole. Is there anyone, do you have any thoughts on, do you ever feel the need to be on the defensive, or how do you deal with someone who I guess maybe is on the defensive about sharing too? Anyone want to take it?
I mean, you got to know your audience too. Like, and you sometimes if it's like you said, the question said that it's like a heavily male audience and she's a female in lead. There's gonna unfortunately the patriarchy, and like you're gonna get some devil's advocate. Like there's always like that comment that's gonna come from someone. So like there's that. But so for me, whenever I feel like opposition, I have to like take a breath and really listen to the question and like you have to do a little bit of ninja skills, because you're also going to be the more mature one, hopefully, in the scenario, because they might be threatened by you or something. So it might be their ego asking you an unnecessary question. So you might have to like do some weed whacking and read through what they're actually asking and like answer it calmly and just explain it and deal with it that way. But a lot of the times with male audiences, you're just going to get that. I have found especially in any sort of online space or anything like that. They always have opinions.
Yeah. You don't owe it, to anyone to have to, defend your experience. As Ardre said earlier, that is, your experience, and you have the right to express it in the manner in which you express it. And so I think, one of the things that I'm going to echo what Lisandra said is, when I get in that situation, because I've had that happen to me, I'm very open about my journey as a pastor's daughter. And there are a lot of people who follow me from knowing me as my dad's daughter and, say, well, like devil's advocate, or he did the best he could, or, all of those things that they like to say to kind of discount, what I'm feeling and what I've experienced. And before I go on the defensive, I have to always check in with myself. This is what cognitive therapy taught me, is to check in and say, whoa, wait a minute. What is that all about? Like, why am I feeling defensive? So I always go inward first. I always am going to check with myself first. What is that all about? And then if I can answer that question, then I'll move to the next question. And if I find out that it's something that I've experienced in the past, and then I'm rubbing up against something that has triggered me, then I'm going to deal with it accordingly. If I answer that question and it's not a trigger, it's just downright annoying and offensive, then that is when I will, do what you guys have said, which is, it's on them, it's not on me.
I think that's really good advice about going inward and looking at, I think, what is it bringing up in you that you're, having a certain response or reaction to. It's really, really good advice. Anyone have any other thoughts on this one? I just find this to be so fascinating. It kind of ties into this broader theme or subject of I'm sharing my story. And especially like what you were saying, Achea, like if people have known you in a certain way or known you in a certain light, and then you're out here being authentically you, sharing your story, what you love, producing what you're excited about, and there's a certain response that you're getting that you didn't anticipate because these were people that were in your corner or knew you or whatever it might be. I mean, that's, I think, an element of sharing your story too, is then the aftermath, for lack of a better word. You know what I mean? Of like what happens after, especially with maybe people in your life that have known you, in a certain way.
Yeah, I mean, that's probably one of the hardest things about evolving. When you have people that have known you for 1,000 years, right? And they feel entitled to an opinion about how you're living your life now. Oh, I knew you when you were 3 years old. Well, I'm 40 now. I'm not 30 anymore, right? And so I would like to be respected as such. And, I've gotten a lot of, you've changed and you're not the same. Well, yeah, I would hope that we've all changed and we've all evolved, and that I'm not the same unsure 19-year-old girl that was, stuck in this patriarchal, misogynistic situation, right? Yes, I've evolved, and that's a great thing. And so it's okay, right, to, come back at those people and just be authentic. And I just simply have said to them, no. I mean, yes, I've evolved, but really, I've always been this girl. You guys just didn't know it. Mm-hmm. And I truly believe that, because I think as women, we kind of grow into ourselves. And that's what's happened. I've evolved into myself, and I'm not doing what people put on me and expect me to do, but I'm doing what I want to do in life on my terms. And so it is difficult. The aftermath is hard. That's probably one of the harder things about change. Yeah. But people will be all right. Just be yourself and they'll adjust, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It's up to everybody else, I think, to adjust.
Yeah, it's not us. It's them.
No. Ardre, Kimothy, Lisandra, any thoughts on this? I mean, Achea, you nailed it. It's about everybody else adjusting. And hello, evolution, you're supposed to evolve. if I'm the same as I was 10 years ago, God help everybody. We're all supposed to evolve and keep changing.
Yes.
I think a lot of people that are scared to share in the online space because of that, because there's like a permanence to putting something out there, or like I have a lot of people that I work with that are even afraid to like say what they do, because they're like, I don't know if it's like the perfection mentality and it being perfect, but really, truly we evolve. And I think we understand that when we see people's stories as they evolve over time. But I feel like I'm hard on myself too. So I think I see other people that I work with be pretty hard on themselves. And I think that we do evolve. We have to give ourselves the grace that we would give our friends as they continue to evolve, and the people that we love. And we have to give that to ourselves, because sharing stuff out in the like online or anything like that. I mean, I've had 100 different lives basically since I was in high school. I've been like a bunch of different things, and they're all still me. And I feel like every version is a better version. And I think it all makes sense to the people who love me, and they're the only ones that matter. Everybody else, like the people who knew me when I was 3, they can take a seat in the stands with their popcorn. They don't get director's cut. No, they don't get the front row access. That's not what they got. So just keep telling your story.
Yeah. One note about evolution too, I always take things back to storytelling. It has been so convenient for me to study the art of storytelling because it just mirrors real life. In storytelling, there's something called a character's arc. And so the character's arc is, you start in one place, and like life, the character is chasing something that is not easily attained. And my one thing, and I think that we're all chasing that, we might not, phrase it as such, is joy. So seeking the joy, no pun intended, but that's what we're all doing. And so it's hard to have joy, right? Because there's so many things that happen that we have to jump hurdles and, go through explosive things to really find deep, joy. But at the end of the day, in writing, the character does not complete their arc unless they have evolved. And so it just is it's a nod to the fact that is what is supposed to happen. If you submit a book to an editor and the character has not completed their arc, it's going to come right back to you. It's unacceptable, because that's not what happens in real life. And so when we think about evolution, it is what we are supposed to do. And when people don't understand that, then, we're just not being truthful about what happens in real life. We can't stay the same. We're not supposed to stay the same. We have seasons, we must evolve. But I just think it's interesting that in storytelling, even, that is the truth, and that is the way that it's supposed to happen. We must evolve.
We must evolve. And the journey is ever changing, it's ever moving. And so your evolution is, I think, a really key component of that journey. So I got to ask you all this question, because we are talking about joy at Seek the Joy Summit. Sharing our stories, I often find, also can bring about a lot of joy. There's tremendous joy from sharing our stories. And, if anyone, and I'm just going to throw it out there, and anyone, please share, the impact of sharing your story in terms of the joy it's brought you, the connection it's brought you. How does joy tie in for you in terms of, storytelling and sharing your story? Whoever wants to go first.
You know what? It's just what you just said is making me think it's so hard to stay true to yourself and peel back the layers as you're returning home to yourself. Or I think of the Russian doll, you're taking off a layer from society, the programming, your parents, or whatever you put on as you grew up. You kind of go through in the arc, you're stripping the layers. I feel like I'm getting more naked every year to who I am. And it's it can be so terrifying, and you can feel like you have PTSD, a physical response every time you put yourself out there, it's in your body. But every time you do, if you can get past that and share authentically, and once you get past that through that door, there's so much deep joy and peace once you get through that. So it's so worthwhile, even when you have all the commentators and spectators saying with all their opinions. It's just so worth it all.
Mm-hmm.
I love that. Anyone else want to share about the impact of sharing your story and the kind of joy it's brought you, or what that has meant?
I get to sleep at night knowing that I've shown up in the world exactly the way that I want to. And I've gotten the power of choice, and I've taken my power back. That makes me really happy.
I love that. Ardre, Lisandra, any final thoughts on joy and our journeys in storytelling?
I just cannot sit on the fact that sharing my story saved my life. You know, that's just the God to honest truth. It is the thing that allowed me to have sanity. It is the puzzle pieces connected, and the space to still put together more pieces of the puzzle, you know? And so I just encourage everyone, and it doesn't always have to be in a dictated format. Sharing your story can happen in so many ways. You can podcast, you can paint, you can draw, you can create, you can take pictures. Sharing a story doesn't happen one way. And so I just encourage everyone to set themselves free, because in my mind, you really can't have access to joy if you are bound by anything. And so to be free means that you also have access to joy.
Yeah.
And I mean, for me, joy in storytelling also comes from being both the observer and the participant in the storytelling. So much of the molecules that make up the alchemy that makes up who I am today is because of the joy that the other people's storytelling has brought to me and influenced how I speak, how I look at the world. And it's such a pleasure to be able to connect with others through either sharing an experience or making somebody laugh or something like that really just connects you. And it's just, for me, it's just like, that's the easiest way to bond with somebody, especially right now where we still can't see each other. So that to me is telling, girl, you know what happened. And they'll just like share, like get the group text, just that's a way of storytelling, but it connects you. It also is on a grand scale when we're doing it like this, but that's the joy of telling a story, connection for me.
It all comes down to connection. I am so grateful to all of you for this conversation today. And I'm reading the comments in the chat and everyone is feeling the same way. This conversation was amazing. So much great information. I feel less alone. I believe with reflection, boundary setting, and intention work, I can free up more bravery for sharing my story. And I just can't thank you all enough. Before we go, any last thoughts or words? I feel like we all beautifully just summed it up, but I want to make sure if you've got any last nuggets of wisdom that we get them here. Anyone? All right, I feel like we got it. Thank you all. Get on TikTok, share your story. I think my biggest takeaway from this too has just been there's so much joy that can come from sharing your story, but it's about knowing when it is right for you to share it. And then to do so, I think, unapologetically, without expectation, without judgment, without worry, which I think is so, so key. So Achea, Ardre, Kimothy, Lisandra, thank you all so much. Really, for this beautiful conversation. I am so, so grateful. And it's through storytelling and talking about joy that we all came together. So it means so much to me. So thank you all so much for being here.
Thank you for having us. Thank you for putting this together.
You're so welcome. Seek the Joy podcast is a production of Seek the Joy Media and created, produced, and hosted by me, Sydney Weiss. You can tune into all of our episodes on your favorite podcast platform. And if you're enjoying the show, hit follow and leave us a 5-star rating and review. Make sure to join the community, join the conversation on our social media channels, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn. We are at Seek the Joy podcast everywhere. And don't forget, you can actually watch today's new episode and all of our episodes on our brand new YouTube channel. Click that link in the show notes to subscribe and tune in. As always, thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. And I'll see you right back here next week for another Seek the Joy Tuesday.